Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, dames en heren, bonsoir. Merci d'être venu. Thank you for coming. Dank je om hier te zijn. We will start with the lecture, the presentation of Rose Issa. And afterwards there is the reception. Introducing Rose Issa, if you give me another hour, maybe I will be able to do that. For me, she is one of the most important visionary curators, gallerists, art specialists, writers, authors, theoricians, and she didn't pay me to say this. I mean, I say this from my own heart. The first time I heard, and then I was already too late, but the first time I heard about Rose Issa was in 2001. She had an exhibition in the Barbican about Iranian art. Now, if you go worldwide, you see projects about Iranian art everywhere, but she was a precursor. And in 2001, she was not beginning. She was already busy in the 90s. So for me, she's a visionary. She was one of the first. She's extremely important also in the career and the life of Monir. She put her back literally on the rails. I mean, Monir had a very hard time, and it was thanks to Rose Issa that she brought her back. On a personal level, it's thanks to Rose that I met her. I just said it in the previous space. I met Monir at Art Dubai. I think it's also already 10 years ago. I'm getting older and older, and I nag more and more. Anyhow, I'm extremely proud and to have Rose Issa here, to have you all here. And I think there's nobody better in the world to introduce the work of Monir Shahroudy than Rose Issa. Ladies and gentlemen, an applause for Rose Issa. Thank you.
There are so many friends here who also knew Monir before me, Nicole. There. And thank you for your patience. Anyhow, thank you, Michelle, also, for so generously, for so many years being interested in Iranian artists, because this is not the first time you're introducing Iranian art. You did it in many Biennale before with Amir Ali Qasemi, young, unknown people from Iran you brought with the CAP, with the collaboration of Vils everywhere where there were any Iranian artists. Even you came to Beirut when I did the Zendegi show to meet up with many Iranian artists. So thank you for this interest and focus and the generosity of the city. We invited them for all these years. The title says 6 decades, even though the focus of my work with Monir was more on 5 decades of her work. Nicole was showing me a bit earlier on images of the work she had, because Monir's career started in the 50s, and in fact she exhibited at the Venice Biennale and the first Biennale of Tehran in the 50s, late 50s, in 58 in fact. But it was with flowers. She draws very easily flowers, and irises, flowers, and later birds and so on. Animals. She has a dexterity in producing those work. But I discovered her very differently. I discovered her in my hotel in Tehran, in Hotel Lale. The Hotel Lale was the old Intercontinental Hotel. If you go to the CV of Monir, she would say Intercontinental in Shiraz and Tehran. But the Hotel Lale that, you know, since the revolution, had 2 huge panels, and I always stayed there. And I always admired those 2 works, which were not signed. One of them very tinily had Ustaz Monir. And I tried to ask, nobody knew who she was, till I went to the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. Actually, these magnificent panels, they are more than 6 meters long and 3 meters high. It also involves her earlier work, which was behind the glass painting, with the influence of Pollock and Jackson Pollock and all these people that she knew in New York, of course. So she painted behind the glass, cut them and incorporated them with the mirror mosaic that are very traditional. I'm embarrassed to say these things because all of you all know her work and know the Iranian tradition, but for just a few who may not know, the mirror mosaics of Iran with the mosque, in the palaces, the mirror, which was a very expensive thing coming from Venice, when they arrived, they were broken, and in order not to lose them, they used for the inside the architecture and the construction work. That anyhow, that reflected when you go to a mosque, you put a candle and the whole room is lit because of that different reflection. But at the hotel at that time, these 2 panels existed, and I photographed them. Unfortunately, today one of them at least is covered, that I'm sure, with the publicity of a bank in front of it with nails. The other one probably will be soon. The last time I went there a year ago was Ajin Furushi in front of it. But at least it reflected Ajin Furushi. It looked like a bazaar, but nevertheless, at least they didn't touch those huge, magnificent panels. They did destroy, however, other columns that she did, but these two existed. And thanks to these two works, I went to the museum, Tehran Museum, and in the storage I found a lot of her work in the storage. I was doing a research on Iranian contemporary art, and I found out that there were some mirror works, and it's only a guy who for many years, for 30 years, defended the storage of Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. That guy told me very quietly, is Monir Farmanfarmaian. He said, don't say Farmanfarmaian, they don't like the family, they may destroy the work, so be very discreet about it. Again, the works were not signed. When later I asked Monir, why didn't you sign it? She said, you know, it's very cheap in my culture and my country. It was not good to sell things. You do it only, and this was something done for the Niavaran Cultural Center. You see the influence she had on Frank Stella and the influence Frank Stella had with her. These are other details of their two huge also murals in Niavaran Cultural Center in Tehran, north of Tehran, because she's also for the queen in the house. I don't put that. But anyhow, it is only, I focus on the mirror work because I thought this was a very signature work. And when I saw those works, I thought, you know, how comes she's not that well known, nobody has done any publication, anything, which is a disaster for a lot of countries in our region where we don't do publications. And finally, when I found where she lived, a family, Fatima Farmanfarmaian in London, I was asking, who is Monir alive? Is she, where is she? So finally, one member of her family gave me her phone number in New York, and I called her for an exhibition that I was doing in 2001 at the Barbican called Iranian Contemporary Art. Initially, it should have been borrowed wares, but they told me nobody's going to understand what is borrowed ware, because not only I was borrowing from the museum and the artist, but also borrowed ware is a sentence in Iranian, in his migzara, in Arabic called halyazu, nothing is permanent. It's about the impermanence of things. You know, the regimes come, the royalties come, the republics come, everything comes and goes. You can be beautiful, you can be rich, this can all disappear also. It's about the impermanence of things. And anyhow, it was called Iranian Contemporary Art. I invited her to, I asked her permission, she said, no, I have nothing. I said, no, I have discovered a lot of your works. Do you give me the permission to exhibit them? And this is how the first big exhibition with the borrowed of works from Tehran Museum happened at the Barbican. She didn't come to that exhibition. She didn't come, the excuse being that maybe it's governmental and I don't have it and so on. But when she heard and she received the catalog and the brochures and everything, and everybody told her it was a beautiful exhibition and her works were there, then she called me from New York and said, Rose, come, let's meet. I went to meet her. At that time, for me, she looked like a retired grandmother, and I was saying, you know, why aren't you doing more works? This is in her flat in New York, where she had already, you see the essence, the initial works that are based on the geometric, always triangle, square, pentagon, somebody's mobile phone, no? Sorry. Pentagons, hexagon, and so forth, so on. All the numbers that are also, that will be reflected in all her work, really, and all the infinite variations, which she calls. The infinity is also something that is, though she has no pretension of being neither Sufi, nor scientific, nor nothing, but you know, it's not for nothing that the fountain was called Omar Khayyam, because Omar Khayyam was himself an astrology, a mathematician, poet, and so on. So he was a scientist of his time. And Monir, without any acknowledging that she's either a scientist or even at that time even an artist, she would do really things intuitively, and in her culture it came from the poetry and the visual knowledge that she had. In fact, Nicole, in the mid-60s, Nicole, who has the early works, which are the flowers and so on, in the mid-60s, drove Monir. They went to discover all she was keen, she was very happy in Iran when she went back after her first marriage to Iran. And she discovered Iran actually, discovering the craftsmanship. The Queen Farah had asked many people, can you improve the craftsmanship of Iranians and can you bring new designs to those work? And they went and discovered lots of tribes and traveled all along. Nicole tells me she liked driving. And they discovered many things, including the Shah Cheragh in Shiraz. And that was the beginning of her career. These are small, tiny things that I saw in her studios that were models really for things that she wanted to make, but she never had the opportunity since the revolution in 1979 to make them. It still has not been made. I'm so shocked that despite all the interest of the museum, those little models have not been exhibited. These are these wonderful little boxes on which I did a book also. Where the time where after the death of her husband, where she made a whole souvenir of everything that about nostalgia, about motifs, about what inspired her, what she liked, and so on. Those boxes, which later were exhibited at the Third Line Gallery. Anyhow, the condition. Before doing that, I should have put the. I made the mistake maybe in the order. I should have put the V&A. When I saw her in New York. I said, what are you doing here? You know, these are all maquettes, but why don't you realize them? She said, it's very difficult to find mirror workers in New York. It will cost a fortune. This is not the type of thing I can do here. And I asked her, why don't you go back? She said, well, if you find me an exhibition in a museum, then I go back. And that was the incentive for me to find her a project at the Victoria and Albert Museum that you see later on. And she came to London, so the Victoria and Albert Museum, it was a huge panel at the opening of the new Jamil Gallery, the Islamic section. We had something like more than 12 meters, 20 meters, I think, of walls. I will show you later. That is the V&A. She saw that, and she said, okay, in that case, if they commission me to do that and they produce it, then I go back to Iran. And for that reason, she went back to Iran. And in some ways, she never went back. She went back, of course, to see her children and for her solo show at the Guggenheim, New York. But in fact, she resided there and even was tempted to sell her flat. I said, forget the flat, it's your children, but we can make enough money for you to buy your flat and your studio in Tehran. And that was, therefore, her first show in Victoria and Albert Museum. I go back. Why? Because at the same time that we did the V&A, she was in Iran. I wanted the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art also to do a show for her. At that time, Sami Azar was the director, but he sort of chickened out. He thought, Farmanfarmaian, it would be a problem if I promote a family who is, you know, everybody who was well off was considered pro-Shah and so on. So they didn't want to do it. So that was the Niavaran Center where she had her mirror work, the cultural center, which are much more neutral, who accepted to do the show, which was based from zero, the point, the line, the triangle, the square, and so on, and all the works. And here you see some of the old works that Nicole also has in her collection, the flowers, the new mirror works that she just did, that moved from number 1 to number 12. And that was the occasion for me also to do her first book, because I was so frustrated. How could a woman of 80 years old woman not have a single book of her work? And today, unfortunately, the one that on the cover is the one that is covered in Hotel Lale, so even if you go there, you won't see it. But I'm glad that these works, I had photographed them then, so that we have a trace of the work, whether they were destroyed or covered up, I don't know. But anyhow, at least one of them put her a little bit on the map and gave me the opportunity during the Victoria and Albert Museum to show her work with a book. That was the exhibition. That was opened by Prince Charles, and everybody really came to that show. A very, very beautiful show. I think one of the most photographed, according to the staff of the Victoria and Albert Museum. Because as you know, everybody wanted to do their own portrait in those broken glasses. I think it was Rumi who said, you know, people always think they know the truth. But truth is like a mirror which falls from the sky and is splattered, and each one of us holds a piece of that mirror thinking we hold the truth. But the reality is that the truth is so diverse and everybody only possesses a part of the truth. And that work really reminds me very much of Rumi's poem. Others in her studio, she became very, very efficient, and these were the years where she produced many works. Some of these are in many collections in Spain, in Russia, in Dubai. In fact, I introduced her to the third line. This is the time when I said somebody in Dubai, because I had lots of clients who were asking for it, and I thought a gallery in Dubai would do a good work. Then many other institutions were interested. ING in Switzerland, where she had quite a few members of her family living in Switzerland and Stadt. Then in a solo show at the Leighton House Museum, always developing her works more and more with reverse glass painting and mirror mosaics, more of them. This work traveled in many institutions. The Birds of Paradise, it was called. It was very three-dimensional, sculpture ornament. And this is a work that was the V&A work later on traveled to Paul Klee Museum. I put the image of Paul Klee because I was very shocked that a museum like that didn't do even an invitation card. They didn't do a catalog, a brochure, nothing. Even recently I went to the press release and I asked them, can you give me the images of their work when they were, because they were installed very nicely next to a video. And when the video moved, the whole work was moving constantly. You know, mirror is changing, because if you put red on blue, the whole work becomes in different colors. Even sometimes Monir herself didn't recognize her work, because if I showed it reflecting the sky, it was blue. She said, no, this is not my work. But I said, yeah, it is. It's just reflecting the trees and the sky, but it is your work. So I say that as an example, but we're not only in the Middle East, we don't have brochure and documentation, but even the Paul Klee Museum in Bern, in Switzerland, didn't leave a trace of that show, which is, I find it shocking. This is another exhibition at the Venice Biennale, the D1 exhibition, East and West, that a young woman actually who worked a lot in Afghanistan conceived it with artists from Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan. Some of the works, you see when the background is red, the whole work looks red. And later on, I was invited to give a talk in Australia. I love this trip because Australia is a country where they don't have a lot of money to throw away in the museums. Therefore, instead of buying Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst and the same names and the same classic, all the usual suspects, they invested in their own artists and regionally. They started with Australia, then they went around, more Asian and so on. Anyhow, they do like here a Triennale of South Asia Pacific, and they invited me, said, can you talk about Iran? Would you consider Iran as part of Asia? I said, of course, in Iranian school where we went, we are Asia, we are in Asia, we are part of Asia. And she said, try to convince us. And I did several talks in different cities, in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, and so on, trying to say that to what extent the link with the Silk Road to Iran is very evident in many things, whether from ceramics to many other things, calligraphical, etc. And this was the beginning of the Triennale of Brisbane and South Pacific to commission works. The first commission was Monir, who did a wonderful, wonderful piece there that they acquired. Then the year later, I think it was Mitra Tabrizian and Parastu Furuhar, who went also contributed. Therefore, you know, it's by going to the institution and convincing them that, you know, we are part of the thing. And I was very happy that how the openness of those Australian museums, well before, I mean, Monir was for over 40, 50 years in New York, and not a single museum paid attention to her, even though on her CV, one work traveled to many places. But these are then the Monir multiples that she did, that was later exhibited at the Guggenheim, but also at Third Line, and on which that was the beginning of when Monir met in Hans Ulrich Obrist, who met Monir and pushed Monir in doing more books, really. And that was the book, and since then he has published several books on her, always mentioning Hans Ulrich, always for many of us, is the head of all the curators. He's considered, you know, has been voted the curator of the year for many years now. And he mentions constantly Monir, and recently he mentions in the last 3 years Etel Adnan, and Etel Adnan is everywhere now. Actually, she's going to be in Port Clay Museum, but this time I told her to insist to her catalogue. So they are doing a catalogue. This is a work that the Metropolitan acquired of Monir. Yes, they felt that so many European museums and Australians were interested, so why not also New York? That was also the beginning of her going often to New York, not only to see her daughters and grandchildren, but also another exhibition of her based on those geometric figures that she did, that travel. That is, I think, in Cab. I have to wear my reading glasses. If my memory is correct. Is that contemporary? No? Oh no, that was a Jamil Prize, sorry. Jamil Prize is a prize that is given by a Saudi foundation, private foundation. They have big money from selling Japanese cars, and they want to encourage artworks by artists, whether they are Westerner or Easterners, but who are inspired by craftsmanship of the East. So it doesn't matter their nationality, their age, and so on. And that year it was her, Rashid Qureshi, Bita Zelaya, and many other Arab and Iranian artists who participated. Hans Ulrich, that I mentioned, the book, is still, I think, available. You can have it on Amazon. It's a wonderful book, and truly, truly, Hans Ulrich did a lot for her promotion. I put his face here because he did promote her book, and he did promote the artist, and have written three books so far, 3 monographs. And as Iran was becoming hot, I'm half Lebanese, half Iranian. I couldn't stop myself not to do an exhibition in Beirut about Iranian artists. And that is a place that reminded me a bit of Monir's work. Can you believe it? They dismantled it. It doesn't exist anymore. It lived only for 7 years at the waterfront near the sea. And I proposed an Iranian show, Zendegi, which means life, because I always thought that very few of us in the Middle East or in developing countries have access to the things that Europe has so easily. They are not aware how many bookshops they have, libraries they have, museums they have, archives and everything, and almost we have none. Very few and not accessible. So what inspired most of these artists are their own life, whether in the cinema with Abbas Kiarostami and Panahi and Mahmoud Boff, it was always real life stories that really created the art scene. They say necessity is the mother of invention. It is true, because in the case of Monir, it was really by traveling and discovering those magnificent works in the mosque or in the palaces that she managed to make them into small artworks that people could carry and have with them. So Zendegi included many 12 Iranian artists, in fact. That was installation. Later she dismantled, and one of them was sold for, I don't know, 300-400. One piece of this. I said, Monir, why did you dismantle it? Because they gave her an old work that she didn't have confiscated 5 years ago. They said, oh, this you can have it back if you give us something new, and she gave one small piece that they made a lot of money on that installation. And this is a hejle. Hejle is, for many of you, I know it's embarrassing to explain what a hejle is. But when there is a death in the family or in the building and so on, people put this work, the hejle, out, and as to remind everybody in the neighborhood that they put the photos of the martyr or the person who died, especially if they are young, in the street and so on. This is the homage that Monir did to the poets she liked, and also to the husband. Well, old poets from Rumi to Sepehri to Abul, etc., and people that she herself loved. So she did that hejle, and I actually had the opportunity of exhibiting it. This was exhibited at the Tropen Museum in Rotterdam, but also when I exhibited it, I had a very close friend of mine, Sheila Whittaker, who was the director of the London Film Festival and National Film Theatre, who died. And we put her picture, and everybody was saying, what's that, and how wonderful funerary piece of work, artwork it is. This is an installation later on that she now the doors of America were open to her, Houston. And Wiels, of course, I have to mention the generosity of the Belgium institution, really. Not only thanks to Michel de Wiels, actually, I think it was Michel who introduced Monir to all this institution. Wiels that did a solo show for her. Then also you were instrumental, Michel, in introducing Monir to CAB, Contemporary Art of Brussels. I don't know if it still exists. It exists still? Yes. Where there were many of the artists that you promoted even before. Fei Zhu, who died also, but when she was alive, Michel exhibited her work in Brussels. It was one of the very few countries that knew about her. Only very recently, 2 years ago, I think Catherine David showed that work in Paris, but not before. In unedited Iran, I don't know if some of you have seen that exhibition. It is again in CAB, in Contemporary Art of Brussels. I show more because it's for those of you who live here. This was, again, the Hejle that traveled quite a few places. I was very sad to send it back to Iran, and we were planning, in fact, to gift it as a gift to Razvin. I don't know what has happened to it. Maybe it is... who has seen the Museum of Monir in Tehran? You're the only one. Ah, no, if you... Is the Hejle there? No, sorry, this one. Is it there in the museum? It is. Okay. In principle, it was supposed to go to Razvin with some of the works, because Razvin is a birthplace of Monir, and but this is also the birthplace of many artists, Mohammad Ehsai, a calligrapher, Shirin Neshat, and so on. And I thought, you know, I can give a call to all this, say, let's give quite a few gifts to that little town, and create a tiny museums as a homage to that town who gave birth to artists. This is her exhibition at the Guggenheim in New York. It was a wonderful installation that started, actually the exhibition started in Serravales Museum in Portugal. The reason is that, of course, New York cannot import the hypocrisy that is behind all this sanction with Iran. Could not have the works coming from Iran directly to America, so it went first to Portugal, and then it was something that was sent from Portugal to New York for the Guggenheim Museum. So Serravales was first acquiring it. And there are many, many more exhibitions after that, of course, to finally reach Tehran, where the museum is called Monir's Museum. They tried to avoid Farmanfarmaian. They did that, they copied the Hans Ulrich Obrist as Monir. It's a wonderful piece on which she worked really very hard. And she was in a rush to do it, because she always thought, you know, I might die, and she's 96, and she was, for me, she's more energetic than many of the young people I know. But she was working very, very hard, and if some days she couldn't go to her studios, on the phone she was pestering the workers. Has this been done? Has this been finished? Take me a photo, give me, and then would go every morning still to check how advanced was the production of the work. So to finally close it, because I know you have so many other things to see here during the Triennale, I wanted to say this was the first museum as an homage to a woman in Iran. In fact, Nigaristan was the museum that the Queen created in the 70s for the Qajar paintings that were distributed, we don't know where, in different museums, and no trace of it, who exactly has what, which museum has what. But from time to time you see it in different museum, the Qajar painting, but that museum finally, which is very central and very a beautiful space and a beautiful garden, it's the first time that a woman artist was credited with a museum in Iran. Thank you for your patience.